Welcome back to Many Voices, Many Visions as we talk this morning with Colleen Kelly, who is the New York City coordinator for 9/11 Families for Peaceful Tomorrows.
Yes.
And you're here in Rochester to tell your story. As just to recap, in case people are joining us, you lost a brother on 9/11 in the World Trade Center. Your brother Bill. And after that, you joined other families who were grieving, trying to make something good come out of something bad, and you formed Peaceful Tomorrows. And tell us once again what your hope, what you hope to accomplish through this organization.
Well, our hope is really to have a serious study and thinking around nonviolent response to terrorism and to conflict. We also want to join our voice with those around the world, all around the world, in the Middle East, in Northern Ireland, in Africa, families who have also lost loved ones to terrorism, who have been through this for much longer than we have, and in many ways are a very brave and courageous example of nonviolent response, of trying to seek out other ways to solve the world's problems.
Mm-hmm. We just saw a public service announcement put out by UNICEF for the children, and very haunting to hear the children's voices singing in the background of all of the bombing. You were in Iraq recently, and you met some children.
That PSA made me immediately think of one day when we were in Basra, and we were outside, and old Basra is just a beautiful, beautiful part of the city. And the air raid sirens went off because, as you may know, that there has been bombing continuously since the first Gulf War in the southern no-flight zone. And so when the sirens went off, we as Americans immediately looked to the sky and began to think about where shelter was. And we were surrounded by about 50 or 60 Iraqi children. They didn't even hear it. They continued to play. This was such a part of their life, and it was they were so desensitized to these air raid sirens. They didn't even hear them. It meant nothing for them. So it worries me. I'm sure the situation is different today, but it worries me that these children have experienced such destruction and anxiety for many, many years. As a child, how do you live and grow?
Well, we have some pictures we want to share. A statistic that startled me was that half of the Iraqi population are under the age of 18.
Yes, true.
Which is
so
amazing.
Very, very young.
A very, very young country. And we'll share some pictures, and you visited all kinds of places, right, in the country of Iraq.
Yeah, these photos that you're looking at now are pictures from a hospital in Baghdad, I believe. It may be in Basra, but I believe this is in Baghdad. And I'm a former pediatric nurse, and we had several medical people on the trip with us, and we went to visit the children specifically in the cancer wards. The Iraqi government has put forth the notion that the incidence of childhood cancers have skyrocketed since the first Gulf War. And we went to go visit and see these children, and it's very distressing to see a child in pain anywhere, anywhere in this world. So it was
very
difficult to be there.
And their innocent smiles, their sweet smiles.
What made me realize through much of this trip is just how we are so much more alike than we are different. I mean, I have 3 children myself, and I think of my kids who fidget in church, and I go to a church in Iraq, and those young kids are fidgeting, and teenagers are goofy no matter where they are. Or, and also it made me think of sorrow. In a mother's eye is the same sorrow, whether it's here or in Iraq. And it's those things, it's those moments that just showed me the connectedness between all of us, and how we have to really hold that precious and find better ways to keep it precious.
How were you received there as you traveled through the country and towns and the cities?
Incredible hospitality. I mean, there's this notion of Arab hospitality that I really didn't quite believe till I had been there, and I kept thinking, here I am, an American, visiting Iraq in January of 2003. We were received incredibly well with food and smiles always. Even walking down the street, we were allowed to pass out these sheets of paper in Arabic and English that explained our mission and why we're there, and people would invariably smile and shake our hands. And I kept trying to flip that image. If our country, who is being threatened in certain ways, if groups of terrorists or Al-Qaeda or Iraqis came to our country, how would we greet them as Americans? And it doesn't all make sense to me, but the Iraqi people were lovely, just absolutely lovely.
Was there any sense, it's so hard for us to understand how the Iraqi people actually feel about us. It's so conflicted with...
We were constantly in the presence of a government minder from the minute we landed in Baghdad to the minute that we left. And the people that we would meet with were very, very acutely aware that the minder was present at all times, and their conversation was extremely guarded. So I never got a real good sense of how people really feel. And it's, for me, it was important to see that part of life in Iraq too, that it's incredibly oppressive, that the regime just has clamps on everything, and I don't know how one lives under those circumstances, but I can tell you that the human spirit has just seemed, you can try to suppress and oppress as much as you want, but people have a way of just eking out no matter what, and that was very clear in Iraq too. The people are very, very proud people, proud of their heritage, proud of the gifts and contributions that they've made to society and the world, whether it's Hammurabi's Code of Law or this Fertile Crescent, that they're very well-educated people who are proud culturally and nationally. That very much struck me when I was there.
Is there any dilemma in your own mind about, if we do nothing militarily and the suffering continues in such an oppressive regime?
Absolutely.
Is there a moral dilemma in your mind about whether or not violence is justified in some cases?
Yeah, the moral dilemma for me is always in the case of immediate ongoing genocide. And I don't think that that's happening in Iraq right now. For me, when the U.S. administration makes the case for going to war in Iraq because of the chemical weapons, I agree, but those weapons were used on a mass scale in 1988. And I think part of the distrust of motives now is, where was our public outcry in 1988 when literally Kurds were being massacred on such a large scale? Why now? Why, when the inspectors were there, when the eyes and the ears of the world were all on Iraq? He couldn't move anywhere without people noticing. So to me, it's the timing of it all that I certainly do think it becomes a much, much more of a huge moral dilemma if it's an ongoing active genocide. That's difficult not to think about nonviolence and military intervention. But I don't see that. In March of 2003, that was not happening in Iraq, to my knowledge. Maybe the U.S. government has other knowledge, but that was never part of what was presented to the American people.
Did you make friends while you were there that you stay in touch with now?
Yes, and I have friends, very dear friends, two are in Baghdad right now.
And have you had a chance to hear from them, from what's going on from their point of view?
Yes, that they've been able to send out emails. Up until this past weekend, they were trying to visit hospitals every day, confirm deaths, confirm injuries, get a sense of what was really happening. They tried to have a birthday party for a young girl who turned 13, and it was a beautiful story. They were on the Tigris River, and they had gotten balloons, and it was one of the hotel workers' daughters, and in the middle of the party, bombs started falling, and it just, in the letter, they just speak of the reality of this. Here's this big nodal event in this young woman's life, and it's being surrounded by this destruction, and it's very, very sad to read, and I'm very worried for their safety.
Are those people you're referring to members of 9/11 families?
They're members of other groups that are in Iraq called Iraq peacekeeping teams. There's several Iraqi families that, for whatever, I remember meeting one woman who reminded me a lot of my grandmother, and I just think of her a lot because she lives right near a bridge, and she really struck me. So I think it's that one-to-one human contact that really makes it much more difficult to condone any kind of a military action. That there's very real people. It's not collateral damage. It's very real people that are hurt and killed in a war.
We want to put the information for the photos back up on the screen, because one of the people you traveled with did some wonderful photography work, and if you go to her site, Linda Panetta, you'll find hundreds more wonderful pictures of children and men and women of all ages in Iraq, and it's somehow necessary, I think, to see those faces at this time. Well, we need to take a short break, but we have a little more time, so when we come back, we'll have some final words.
Great.
Stay right here with us. Welcome back to Many Voices, Many Visions. The photos you see on the screen are just a small example of what you will find if you go to this website of Linda Panetta, who traveled to Iraq with our guest Colleen Kelly and took pictures of the families they met there, the men, women, and children. They're beautiful pictures, and we invite you to check them out on that website. And now some final words from you, Colleen. Earlier in the show, you mentioned that your family had different opinions and different ways of handling this tragic loss of your brother, which makes me think that diversity is not just about our color, culture, or creed, but each of us is unique in our own way as well. So there's diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, and although I celebrate diversity every Sunday morning, I think it's a wonderful thing, it's obviously not always an easy thing.
No.
So what have you learned about how to deal with these differences that sometimes cause tragic events to take place and consequences?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think part of it is that diversity takes a lot of hard work, and meeting someone that you don't agree with is really hard work. It can be quite painful. But it's also incredibly rewarding work. I think of the country right now, I think so much of this, the antagonism in the country right now is not really, what's the word I want to use? I think it's based on a lot of fear. People are generally afraid, and they're scared, and they don't want to talk to other people with differing viewpoints because they're so scared. And I think bottom line is all of us want safety and security for ourselves and our families. We're just differing about how to do that. And what's been helpful to me is to look at all the different September 11th families that I know. And living in the city, I run across quite a few of them. People have chosen amazing ways to honor the memory of their loved ones. For some it's the memorial, for some it's skyscraper safety campaigns. For Peaceful Tomorrows, it's about bringing hopefully a little more peace, or thinking about peace and ways to bring more peace to this world. That's the way that we have chosen to honor our loved ones.